Well, thank you for being part of this, and I can't wait to hear your story. Can you start by just telling me who you are and what it is that you do?
My name is David, and I am a teacher, bilingual elementary school teacher by profession. And then for the last number of years, I've been serving as an officer, an elected leader of the teachers. And I'm now currently the vice president of the California Teachers Association, representing over 300,000 educators across California.
In addition to being a teacher, you are an elected union leader. Some students listening might not really even know what a union is. So can you give us an explanation of what is a union and why is a union important?
A union is a democratic organization of workers, by workers, for workers, where it is about workers being able to have a collective power that's strong enough for them to make demands of their bosses. These demands could be about money. They also could be about safety. It's also about collective democratic voice. And for some unions, it also could be much broader. It could be about demands that also support their students or their communities that they serve. And so, but the very basic thing is it is an organization by workers, for workers, for us to really have a voice in our lives.
Can you describe your job? What is it that you do on a daily basis and what are your responsibilities?
There's different positions within the union, right? And they're all elected. I was the treasurer for many years of my local union, now the state local. And so that has a lot of stuff to do with money and creating the budgets. Now I'm vice president. Currently, I'm working a lot on developing community schools. That's been my most I'm working with 20 locals across California who are working to kind of build schools that are developed and envisioned and by the teachers, the educators, and the community and the students to really define what education means, from the most basic stuff to the exciting stuff like curriculum, all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of a project I'm involved with right now. My job is to support the members who elect me. We have a governing body that's called our board of directors. So I have those meetings once a month. We also have what's called our state council, and that's 700 teacher leaders from across the state who are elected to create policy to kind of give the direction for the union for then the officers like me to follow. So my work also involves, as you're saying, going to visit locals across the state, and we have 1,000 locals in California. Half of them have less than 50 people. So it means going to small areas across the state, but also big areas like LA and San Diego and Oakland and San Francisco. So it's a lot of it is just going and connecting with the members and making sure that any decisions that I make or any things I take part of, it's in line with the goals and aspirations of our members.
Can you tell me what some of the inspirational factors were in your life that led you to become an elected union leader?
I mean, I think it's partly my family and just always being told that it takes struggle to make sure that everyone gets what they deserve, that's a part of life, and that's an exciting part of life. It's a hard part of life, and there's a lot of setbacks and there's a lot of losses, but it's also a part of life that kind of feeds you. And I think the union part of it actually came out of my teaching. I didn't go into teaching thinking I would be a union leader. I went into teaching, trying to, serve the kids, and I learned quickly that both my rights as a teacher were not being respected by the system, and the rights of my students and their own desires were not being met by the system, and that it took a collective action to kind of turn that around. And I was lucky that I got connected with a group of people who mentored me and I learned from, and also I played a role in really doing that work.
What were the practical steps that you took to become an elected union leader?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because in college, I went to an organizing institute for union leaders, and I was being trained to be a union leader. And I went and talked to this professor of labor studies who I liked at my university. She said, David, don't do that. Go become a worker. Go work. Go find a job and something that you love and get involved with your own union. And that's the way, a really member-led way of doing this kind of work. It wasn't later, so I really reflected upon that. There are people who are amazing who do commit themselves as employees, as workers, as staff, to supporting other workers in unions, and that's a great thing. But I don't want to also take away from the fact that there's a big role for workers ourselves to kind of play in our own unions. I said unions are it's a gift, and people have struggled for them, and they're not where they need to be. If we're self-critical, there's also a lot of work that we have to do in our own unions to make them stronger, and that should be led by our members.
If a young person comes to you today and they're maybe about to graduate high school or about to graduate college, and they're going to get into the workforce soon and earn a living, and they came to you and said, should I join a union or not? What would you say?
I would say absolutely yes. I'd say, first of all, what a gift to be in a profession that has a union. I would say go to a meeting, check it out, Union members, by the way, on average, when you look at studies, make more money than non-union work, have better job protections, have access to health care and retirement far more. It's not just a great kind of thing to be part of a democratic thing. It actually makes a difference in your life in terms of your compensation you get as a worker. Be conscientious around looking for jobs that have unions. And even sometimes there's internships and unions. Sometimes there's places where unions actually have trainings for people coming up in the ranks to kind of bring people into unions and into the work. So I'd say also look for that kind of work as well.
What is the skill set that a person will benefit from when they're in a leadership position?
I think it's Cornel West who said, if you don't love the people, you can't lead the people. So you first have to love the people and the work and what it's about, and I think that's first and foremost. A union leader also has to be a listener, someone, again, if it's a collective enterprise, a collective effort, you're not going to be, even when you think you've got the best idea, if you can't collectively get people behind it, it will make no difference, because individualism is counter to a collective work like a union. So I think it's a lot of listening to people. It's a lot of times around providing vision to people and really kind of thinking out some hard things and you're putting out your own perspective and then thinking it out with other people. And then, to be honest, there's just some hard work.
What's a kind of specific challenge that you faced in your job recently?
This whole pandemic. A lot of workers across this country with no unions were forced to go back to work in places that were not really safe. And it may have been even some of your own parents were in situations where they were forced to be in working conditions that were not safe. So we as a union tried to have a collective voice around that. And they demanded that, for example, that we have access to vaccine. We've struggled around keeping people alive and keeping people safe.
Well, thank you for being part of this.
Thank you for having me.